Some little kids, they want to grow up, be president. Some kids want to be a doctor, you know. I just wanted to be bad. They kicked me out of school. I thought that was great. Shit, I don't have to go to your school. That was the best thing in the world. Some people, they want to do the right thing. I like doing the wrong thing. Everyone's always telling me, yo, you gotta change. I'm about stacking change, yo. Stacking change.
The most important skill in life is knowing when to leave a room. A lesson I learned from the summer classic Spring Breakers. Briefly, Spring Breakers follows four best friends whose quest for endless adventure takes a dark turn after they are arrested and bailed out by a drug dealer. The film stars James Franco in his most memorable role to date. I mean, he came in like a hurricane, and nothing and nobody stood a chance against him. Introduced to Faith, Britt, Candy, and Cotty, broke college students whose only goal in life is to have a memorable spring break, leave their small worlds behind, and explore the unknown without a budget. The movie is a visceral and relentless nightmare about the stark contrast between appearances versus reality. You can also see it as a very cruel coming-of-age story. Not so much about finding yourself, but seeing who you really are and accepting that. We follow these four college students in a transitional time period in their life. The euphoria of being young is starting to wear off. And this idea of spring break forever is really a dream to stay forever young. The film opens up with our characters in a college lecture on how injustice and violence can radicalize individuals to pursue freedom without regard for consequences. These students aren't necessarily grappling with racial injustice or war. Their battle is FOMO, fear of missing out. And this is driven by a lack of resources and time. This movie feels especially relevant today. I've watched this movie many times. It's a movie I randomly think about, and I think we get so caught up in what people's lives look like, and we don't really think or really appreciate how large that gap is between what we're seeing and what they're actually going through. The film shapes its characters by testing their endurance and rapidly shattering their world, forcing them to confront a reality that they might have either escaped or avoided or never really dreamed they'd be in such close proximity to. The only character we get to kind of know is Faith, played by Selena Gomez, who's given the responsibility of safeguarding their spring break fun. All four girls live a very monotonous but blessed life. They earn enough to get through college, but not enough to enjoy the luxuries of what life has to offer. This is reflected in the way their lives are filmed. Dimly lit, monotonous college parties that feel more like a way to pass time than to really enjoy. As spring break approaches, the campus gradually empties out, leaving the girls alone in dark, lifeless hallways and rooms with nothing to do but imagine all the experiences they're missing out on. Part of their motivation for wanting to have this dream spring break is to see something different, to discover what the world might have to offer outside of their routine. Stability for them is a kind of fear. Faith believes people are miserable because they're trapped. Everyone sees the same thing, the same shops, they go to the same malls, and this sameness is slowly killing them from the inside. And a new environment can definitely change your world. But in their case, it's not really about escaping or taking a brief break from their world. They want to enter a reality that's either inaccessible to them or just totally unpredictable. And again, I think social media really adds to this feeling where you're watching people live these lives and you think, why not me? And that's exactly what these girls are going through. They're imagining all the fun their peers must be having, and they feel like they have a gun to their head. Despite their best efforts, they can barely scrape together enough money to get through the week, let alone afford a trip out of town to party with wealthy spring breakers. Impulsively, they decide to steal a car and rob a diner to fund this dream getaway. Although only 3 of them were involved in the robbery, Faith still chose to reap the rewards. And the trip begins exactly as it ends, in chaos and confusion. And the film is a non-stop parade of partying college students drinking until oblivion. Some of the footage is shot in VHS style, evoking the feeling of a hazy memory rather than capturing a moment as it unfolds. The film also frequently plays with time, looping in the same memories over and over again. Eventually, these idealized recollections of their spring break, their breaking point, giving way to far darker and less favorable memories. And these breaking points are emphasized by the film's change in perspective. It goes from nostalgic flashbacks to sudden glimpses into the future, revealing the consequences of the girls' actions as they double down on having an endlessly good time. The entire journey feels like one big fantasy. They are so absorbed in their world, they really fail to take in the environment around them. And I like how danger slowly creeps in through James Franco's character and these two twins. And even the partying intensifies, their drug use intensifies, their drinking intensifies, and it's quite easy to lose yourself. I mean, they go from 0 to 100 seamlessly, and it's not really something they're appreciating until they're sober. The trip originally begins as an escape, and at the start it's going so well that they come to believe that maybe, just maybe, they can keep this going forever. And they're riding a high entirely fueled by their own egos, chasing a single goal, which is never to feel miserable again. College is definitely a transitional time period in someone's life, time where the weight of responsibility slowly creeps in, and it's slowly burdening these dreams they held so freely. Suddenly, all these things they wanted, they're starting to realize it's going to be very hard to get, and it might take a lot longer than they anticipated, and that's not really something that they have the time or patience for at the moment. They repeatedly emphasize how much they want to escape and how they're willing to do anything to get out. And that initial robbery was really driven by a sense of urgency, as if they had a gun to their head. And they have this desperation to live life to the fullest while they're young, as if there's an expiration date for fun and adventure. And the idea of spring break forever is less a desire for endless fun and more as an effort to preserve this idealism, one that has yet to be touched by the harshness and discipline of adult life. Tragically, instead of discovering themselves, they end up being forced to confront who they really are. Let's decide whether what they hope for is possible or totally out of reach. Anyone who's partied or has gone out knows how exhilarating and relaxing that can be. There's a certain freedom in taking a break from your life every now and then and doing things you normally would not do. And if done right, you can come back refreshed and ready for the grind. However, if you don't do it correctly, you can end up craving an even greater escape. The film constantly downplays the severity of their actions through these very long party scenes, but the tone of the film dramatically shifts when they're arrested, forcing reality to finally break through the illusion. The arrest is when you start seeing a distinct shift in each character. Andy, played by Vanessa Hudgens, was on another level. I mean, there's not a lot of dialogue in this film. Each character is fleshed out by their increasing tolerance for violence and chaos. I actually think the actresses gave a phenomenal performance because you can see the toll it's taking on them physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, I was very impressed by how the film was able to show us their breakdown and not necessarily tell us. You don't really have these very long conversations about people crying and I can't believe we did that. You just feel it the longer they stay away from home. And this evolution is especially apparent when James Franco's character comes in. If you notice, James Franco's character, Alien, is the one who does all the talking. These girls just sit and listen, absorbing everything he has to say. They never really protest or resist to his face. The only glimpse we get of each character's inner conflict or remorse is express a desire to go home. And I think that's why you don't follow the herd. These party scenes feel the same because everyone just blends in together. You can't really tell who's who. And for a while, these girls were just like everyone else. Once they're arrested, they're no longer like everybody else. And so much of this film explores the question, what are you willing to do to get ahead? As people grow older, they compromise more and more and do far worse to maintain their lifestyles. Often, to be honest, they get away with it. Even if you're never caught, you still lose something. The longer you avoid accountability, the harder it becomes to recognize which parts of yourself are worth letting go to grow and which parts you've lost forever. Remarkably, they actually get away with the robbery. They end up being arrested for a minor drug offense, and the whole thing did feel like a setup. Suddenly, this rich, colorful haze disappears, and the landscape looks far less inviting. It's no longer dreamlike. It's very dull and disorienting. It's at this point we're introduced to James Franco's character Alien, who in my opinion is one of the greatest characters of all time. Alien, played by James Franco, built an empire in part by exploiting and terrorizing spring breakers. He describes himself as, I think, 10% gangster and 10% rapper, 90% gangster, something along these lines.
Spring break.
We don't learn that much about Alien, but from what little we gather, his whole life has been a struggle. And the idea of spring break is a fantasy that he could only dream of. And the name Alien is super fitting. He drifts through the world of spring breakers like an outsider, searching for meaning and solace in those looking to fly a little too close to the sun. First, you assume he's going to be comedic relief. However, James Franco plays him with such subtlety and intensity. His presence feels like such an unusual contrast to 4 college students who are not used to encountering someone like this. The closest they've gotten to someone like Alien is in the movies. Alien is a true criminal, and by his own admission, he's committed every crime under the sun.
Gangsta.
He has a very negative view about spring breakers, but he conceals it quite well. And he views these outsiders as an opportunity to expand his empire, either through helping him with these robberies or offering him some type of emotional comfort. When Kati, Britt, and Candy initially commit that robbery, we don't actually see it. We only see the aftermath as they drive away, super happy and excited about what's to come. And I think the fact that we don't see it initially helps the audience also enjoy their spring break.
Spring break.
However, the more time they spend with Alien, the more flashbacks we get about that robbery, revealing not only their lack of remorse, but just how violent and aggressive the whole thing really was. In fact, before the robbery, they told themselves to detach and pretend they were in a video game or a movie, as if their actions existed in a world they weren't really accountable to. These girls live in a world where privilege means spring break, and being your true self involves living without consequences. During the arrest, Faith keeps protesting that this wasn't how it was supposed to happen, this wasn't how it was supposed to end. She brushes off the robbery as a minor detail, just a necessary evil in their pursuit of self-discovery. However, their fun came at other people's expense. What if someone they robbed that day needed that money to pay their bills? Alien, on the other hand, comes from a violent and unforgiving world, one shaped by crime, survival, and a trail of bodies. He resents these spring breakers because they can come and go as they please, and he's trapped in place. He can't go anywhere. The idea of escaping into a world beyond his brutal reality is a dream that he's never been allowed to chase. All these characters talk about throughout the film is how much they want to chase and achieve their dreams. None of these characters show any concern for the consequences their actions have on other people. Once Alien enters the picture, these girls are tested mentally, physically, and emotionally. The first to run is Faith. She understands quite quickly that the party is over. I thought the transition between these dreamlike spring break parties that feel very safe and very contained to these more adult underground parties was really well done, genuinely unsettling. Even the question, do you want a party, takes a much darker and threatening undertone. Around Alien, the girls stick out like a sore thumb. They can't exactly disappear into the crowd anymore, and their difference doesn't make them special, it makes them extremely vulnerable. Faith really struggles to leave without the group, and this is the same for every other character. And up until this point, each character kind of blends. They were interchangeable because their identities and choices were very much shaped by the group. The more Alien tries to tempt Faith to stay, the more she doubles down and insists that she wants to go home. And that seems to be the only thing these characters are sure about at the end of this film. They just want to go home. Now that spring break is over and they've been arrested, they really need to stand on their own. And making decisions alone is proving to be much harder than they anticipated. So much of finding yourself is knowing when to be a part of something and when it's time to stand alone. You can also see the consequences of their actions slowly start to take their toll. For some, like Faith, it shows emotionally. She's crying. She literally looks like she wants to scream. For others, it begins to manifest physically. Over time, you notice Kati's character is just sleeping more and more. The contrast between that initial robbery and the robberies they commit with Alien are night and day. At least during that initial robbery, no one was physically harmed. However, with Alien, they're witnessing all kinds of violence and brutality. I mean, they're really scaring people, they're tying people up, and the entire scene is shot like a dream with Britney Spears playing in the background, really blurring the line between fantasy and reality. And as an audience, you're really enjoying yourself, like you're laughing because the violence is being downplayed.
Gangsta.
making it very easy for us to slip into their perspective. They are totally detached and emotionally removed from what's happening. By wearing masks, they shield themselves from consequences, leaving Alien to carry the emotional burden of what they've done. I think it's becoming very easy for us nowadays to separate ourselves from our actions. And the mindset is very much, sure, I rob people, or sure, I do this for a living, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad person, or doesn't really mean that this reflects on who I am. I think our hunger for an experience, something thrilling, something different, can really lead you down a dangerous path if you're not careful. The plot thickens when Alien's rival is introduced, played by Gucci Mane. He plays a man called Big Arch. There's no real animosity between them. They seem to interact just fine, but you do get a sense that there's a lot of unresolved issues between them. Alien has expanded his business beyond robbing spring breakers, and this has drawn him into a world of a much larger and well-connected criminal. You get a sense that Alien is not just motivated by money, but this desire to prove himself in some way. And by this point in the film, by the time we meet Big Arch, he has these girls committing robberies for him without his supervision. And we don't actually see these robberies. However, you start to see the emotional toll it's taking on them. It's written in their either silence, emotional detachment, or increasing lack of self-control. And you keep waiting for someone to snap, like you keep waiting for Alien or something crazy to happen, but the characters that end up causing the most mayhem are not the characters you would expect. The film takes a very dramatic turn when Big Arch initiates a drive-by shooting, resulting in Cody's injury. And Cody's breakdown is deeply emotional. I mean, she's lost it. She's crying in the shower. She can barely look at herself. Thought of going back to normal feels like a blessing at this point. And it's not really about going home necessarily, but it's about regaining that sense of security and predictability they were really looking down on earlier. For the final violent act, Britt and Candy phone their mothers and express how much this trip has changed them for the better. In this phone conversation, they express that they don't just want to do better, but they want to be better, because in the end, they've come to realize the secret to life is being a good person, or at least trying to be a good person. And throughout the film, we keep getting these voiceovers. This is as close to a narration as we get, of each girl calling their mother or their grandmother and telling them what a dream vacation this is, and explaining how safe and happy they feel, which prior to the arrest was true. And this final call almost feels like a final goodbye. And throughout the film, they repeatedly ask, "Are you afraid?" A question that grows heavier with every reckless decision. As their actions escalate, so does their awareness about the possible consequences. Like, life stops being a video game. And in a weird way, killing Alien's enemy felt like a way to end this nightmare. It's really a desperate attempt to take some control back and hopefully start over without interference. The final scene in this film is very intense and unexpected. It just kind of hits you out of nowhere. I did not anticipate Alien being the first to go down, let alone Britt and Candy to charge forward with such ruthless, confident aggression. I mean, they move forward without hesitation. I mean, you don't even get a sense that they're thinking of looking back, because they understand that there is no going back. In a weird way, committing to this murder was a way of taking accountability for their actions. Like, I know it sounds strange, but this is the closest to accountability we've seen from these girls. And I think this lack of hesitation really stemmed from a will to survive. I mean, they were shooting like they were fighting for their lives. In contrast, Alien's hesitation really does suggest he's reached the end of his own life. I mean, even prior to this whole massacre, he really wasn't sure. He kept asking them, "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this?" And I think his life had been so difficult that he's almost lost the thread. He's achieved all these things he's wanted, but it hasn't really brought him closure or peace. And at the end, his escape was death. Their expressions reveal a quiet exhaustion. Again, not a lot is said. It's just communicated facially or physically. And you can see just how lucky they feel that they're going home. And they'd finally reached their limit. They reached their breaking point. And the idea of spring break forever, honestly, is a very admirable goal. In part, it's an appreciation for youth. Their time with Alan marked a turning point in their life, ushering them into a new phase. One far less glossy and idealized than the carefree worldview they had at the start of the film. And this small, boring world of theirs will never look the same again. They escape with the cruel realization of just how easily you can find yourself lost and alone, how easily you can adjust to a life that's so different from the one you imagined, and finally, how easily you can become the opposite of everything you've ever dreamed of. And so overall, I highly recommend this film. I can't believe how great James Franco was in this. And it's not caricature, because underneath his facade, you just see a man that's really tired and really holding back. And it's such a fantastic film. If you've seen it, please let me know, and until next time.